Hello everyone, welcome to the video for our fourth embroidery class for our Zoom embroidery series 2023. Today we are starting a brand new project, and you can see here the start of it. We're going to cover all of the stitches in our fourth class that are here, and it's going to be very easy to do that because it's all the same stitch. What? And it's a stitch you already know. It's a stitch we learned in class 3. This is the concavous stitch or the lazy daisy. So we're going to jump right into this version here. This is a layered daisy, and it's just a circle of lazy daisies done on this outer ring, and then another circle of daisies done on the inner ring, and they sort of overlap and work themselves in between this outer ring. You can see here when I turn this sideways, this stitch is very raised off of the fabric. So this is a really textured stitch. You can do as many concentric circles or whatever shape you want as you desire. So as far as the shapes go, of course, you can do a circle, but you can also do a square. You can do like an amoeba shape. But the key to this is that you want to have concentric rings, we'll call them, of whatever shape that you choose. So since this is the first shape we're going to do on your hoop on your new project, I'll sort of give you an idea of the way we're laying this out. We're just going to start with this one, right? So pick a shape. If you like wibbly wobbly shapes like this, draw one of those. If you like straight edges, draw one of those. If you want to do a circle, that's great. For this one, I traced a quarter onto my fabric for the outer ring and a dime for the inner ring. So this is going to be a really fun project because you're going to get to choose the way you lay it out. And what I did is I just did this circle, and then for the next stitch, I just sort of laid this in next to it. So we're just going to start. We're not going to think about it too much. So you just want to pick a kind of shape for this layered lazy daisy that speaks to you, because this stitch works with anything. So I am going to do another circle, and I'm just going to pick a place. Here I go. No, I'm going to do it in the center. What? Okay. Oops, that's not my erasable pen. Here's my erasable pen. I'm going to draw my outer circle. And then this time I didn't have a quarter and a dime handy, but I have this string. Sort of eyeball that. Oops. This does not have to be perfect. Okay. So if you don't remember how to do the lazy daisy, this is the one that's like a little daisy petal. If you want to draw out the shape, it's like this. And so on my circle here, I'm going to be working my petals like this. So if you are more comfortable drawing them out, you can do that. So this takes it doesn't take a ton of thread to do this stitch, but because we're doing a large shape, you're going to use a lot. So I would go fingertip to shoulder on this, and you'll probably need to reload. And then I just want to show you again on this one so you get an idea of because we want to use this for 3 classes. So about, I have small hands here. So this is, 2 to 3 knuckles of a finger. This is about the size of a couple of fingers together. So you want to think about getting 3, 4, 5 shapes for 3 classes. And we can work in on the 3rd class, we'll probably be working shapes in just wherever we can fit them. And that's great. That's part of the design. So here we go. Lazy daisy. review. I'm going to come up from the bottom of my petal shape, my teardrop petal shape. I've got a knot in my thread here. And then I'm going to go back down in the same place or right next to it. And I want to check over here that I'm not going through my knot. I'm not in this case. I have done it many times and it makes it a little bit harder. So just check your knot is taut and that your needle isn't going back right through your knot on this first one. Okay. Now, the trick to the lazy daisy is that you've got this loop and you're going to come back up through the fabric at the top of your teardrop petal shape inside the loop of this thread. There's one. And then the finishing step for the lazy daisy is to go back down on the just around the outside. So this thread comes up on the inside of the petal. My needle's going back down just on the outside, and I do a little tacking stitch here. Okay. And I'm just going to keep working my way around my circle or whatever shape you've done. You're starting on your outer ring. Now, pro move, if you recall from class 3, is that I go in at the base of my petal, come back out in the same spot. And now because I want to come through the loop of my thread, I'm going to run. I'm just going to take this thread here, loop it behind, and then when I push my needle through, my loop is made. Now, I've got a space between those. That's probably not ideal. So I can either, I'm just starting out here, so I can either loosen this petal up because this is a tension-based stitch. I can loosen it up so that it's a little bit fatter because I want this to be a nice full fill stitch. I'm going to tack that down. So I drew my petals a little far apart, so I'm going to actually start this a little bit closer. Okay. Back in, right next to it are the same hole, pro move. I'm coming out at the top. This slips behind. Again, I want this to be a little bit of a fatter shape. And I'll tack that. Okay, so I don't have the full circle done here, but you can see I've done part of it. And I'm going to do my next ring in a contrasting thread. Now, I think this actually, if you want this to be like a nice, bold, solid fill, I would recommend doing this all in the same color because it's impossible to be exactly perfect with the way that you put in this second layer. Now, you can see I did this one with a different color and it actually looks great. So if you want to have different colored rings, go for it. But if you're a little bit of a perfectionist, I would start with trying your first one with the same color, just in case. So, all right. Now for my second one, I'm just going to draw another little ring in here. Same thing, long thread, got a knot in the back. And I'm going to start here. And what I'm going to be aiming for is putting the inside, putting the tacking stitch of the second ring of Lazy Daisies either inside the petal above it or in between the petal above it. Because there's going to be fewer daisies in the second ring, you just sort of have to figure that out, how that's going to work. It's not an exact science. I'm going to do the same thing here. Check this out. See how close my needle is because I'm going in the same hole, but I managed to miss the knot again, so that's good. And I'm gonna come out right here. Put that behind. And tack that down. So because you already know this stitch, this is pretty much it. Oh, oops, I twisted it. We're just gonna keep doing that. Got a little funny. There we go. Just go for the next one right next door here. Tack it down. So I did this a little bit bigger so that you could see on the video what I was doing. So you can see there's kind of a big difference here between the appearance of this one because I did much shorter stitches. They were about this big, and the ones I'm doing on the video are about twice that big. So I've got a bigger gap in here. So again, this is a tension issue. If I pulled these really, really tight, I would just need to have them closer together. And then I wouldn't have the white space of the fabric showing through. So it's just an aesthetic choice. I think with trying to use this as a fill stitch, you'd want shorter stitches closer together so that you're just getting a big burst of color as opposed to this these spaces. But again, I don't know what you're doing. Maybe you would like that. I'll do one more and then we're going to move on to our next use of the Lazy Daisy. Oh, and so for this one I had just the two rings. And for here I could have another layer and they would all come out of the same. It would be my third row would start here in the same point. So that would get a little bit tricky as far as making sure things didn't get knotted and stuck to each other. So you just want to go really slow if you're going to have that third layer coming from the same point. Or maybe you don't want that and you could just fill that spot with French knots. That would be a great way to use up that space and get a solid ring of color. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next stitch or the next use of the Lazy Daisy. I'm just going to knot this off. Out of my way. Okay, so the next one that we're gonna do is we're gonna move over to this one here. Now I I picked a wibbly wobbly shape that I didn't even think about, and I picked a color that I didn't think about, and ended up with this that sort of looks like a brain, which I now feel inspired to make a embroidery project of internal organs based completely on this brain shape. But anyway, that's beside the point. So for this one, you can do any kind of shape. Again, it does not have to be symmetrical, but I would recommend keeping it fairly narrow, like this one is here. Okay, so here's a weird shape. The thing about this is it needs to have a straight line or straight-ish line down the middle of whatever you do. So, and again, you want your stitches are going to be working from the center line to the outside. So you don't want to have it be like a really, really long stitch. You can see here on my longest stitch that because there's so much space here, because it was such a long stitch, I got some gapping in the color. Whereas these narrower places where it started here and ended here, you get a much bolder swath of color. So that's something to think about. Now, if you don't like wibbly wobbly shapes, you can do a rectangle on this, and then you got to have that center line. You can do an oval. You just have to have that center line. A circle, this is getting really pretty wide here. That's, and you can see next to my finger, that's about the size of a quarter. I wouldn't go any bigger than that. So you're going to pick your shape and we'll go from there. Now I'm going to do a wibbly wobbly shape because I like them and also because I think that that will be a better demonstration for you on how to do this. Now, again, here's the composition that I'm going for. If you are doing all square shapes, you can just put these like squares, rectangles, wherever you want. I'm going for playing with sort of the negative space between my shapes too. So I've got a circle here. So I'll do my wibbly wobbly shape. Oh, I don't know. I'm just going to do something. Here's my wibbly wobbly shape. And my straight line, straightish, right? It doesn't have to be, you don't have to get a ruler out here, but you want it to be, so that has like a little bit of a curve to it. That's fine. You just don't want any kind of like wiggle to your line. All right. And again, this one uses a lot of thread. So you're going to use a long one, got a knot in the end. Now, I would recommend finding your sort of longest stitch, wherever that is, if it's in the middle, if it's over on the side, but that is the distance from your midline to the edge of your shape. And that could be here, it doesn't matter. Mine, I'm thinking, is from here to here. So that's where I'm going to start. Now, this lazy daisy, where our lazy daisy so far has been like this one is going to have a crisscross in it, sort of like an awareness ribbon. Okay, so I'm going to say my longest point on my drawing here of this oval is here. So I'm going to do like that. Okay, and that's what we'll do over here on the fabric. So I'm going to start nearish my tallest point. I'm going to come up. And then instead of going back down in the same hole, I'm going to choose the space that I want in between the crisscross of the end of my ribbon. So I'm going to go right about here. And I'm going to still come up at the highest point. So you can kind of see here that I've got a line here. Oops. If I was making perpendicular lines from my center point, I've got a line here, and then where my needle's going back in, I've got a line here, and I'm coming back up in the midpoint. Okay, so in between it this way. And that's because I want to take my needle out here to do this. I want to get this shape going on in here. So go back down, coming back up in the middle. Now, if I was going to do a regular old lazy daisy, I'd go like this. But since I want to crisscross, all I have to do is go back the other way. And there it is. Okay, and I'm going to tack it just the same. There we go. Now I'm going to come back down here. And here I can either come up right next to where I went in before, or if I want to have even more crisscross action going, I can come up in between, sort of like in between the little, if this is like a little person, coming up in between their feet. I'm going to try to work with that same width of a gap. Coming up here. Now remember again, regular lazy daisy goes like this. I want to go the opposite way. You'll notice I'm just going to always start on my straight line, and my tacking stitch will always be here on whatever the contour line is on the outside of my shape. Do one more. This is if I want to come up in between the feet, or I can come over here. If I'm trying to get them to line up right next to each other, you can sort of do it backwards. I can come up over here where I don't have to worry about splitting my threads. So I come up over here, go down over here. Technique is the same. I'm going to come up in the midpoint on my outer line. Now again, if I was doing the regular one, now I would go here. Because I'm crisscrossing, I just wrap around that way. tack it down. And that is how you get the crisscross. Let me see if I can play with my light here and get. Yeah. You can really see how that one works, and I'll show you on my brain. So on my brain, I started right here and I worked all the way around. Then I turned my hoop, worked all the way this way, and then I got down here and came around here. So even if you started in the middle, just work your way around your shape and not off as normal. So that's that. And that, I don't know that that has a name. I found the layered daisy and it was called the layered daisy. And I just found this one that someone had done a little different version. It may have a name. I just don't know what it is. So now we are going to move on to this and this. These are the same stitch. Now, if you remember from class 3, we did what I called an open-ended or U-shaped lazy daisy, where you put your needle in here. Let's see, here's your line. Put your needle in here. Or I'm sorry, you came up here, you went down here, and then came up here, which means you got this kind of petal shape as opposed to a teardrop shape. So this is actually called the fly stitch. I was calling it the open-ended lazy daisy, but it's called the fly stitch. And we are going to do that, and you can fill any type of shape that you want as far as how the edges go. But for this one, you do want it to be symmetrical. Let's say you've got a vertical axis line. You want it to be like a mirror image on either side. So for that one, you can sort of decide what you want your axis line to be. So let's say that's my axis line. Now I want it to be a mirror image on either side. I missed. That's okay. We'll continue that. So I want this to continue over here. So I'm going to go like this. Okay, and that is what I did here. And you can see this little sort of line of texture that comes down the middle. Now for this one, I did the same thing. Let's say this is my line, and I did my mirror image here, which actually was just parallel. Okay, so you can do that. Again, for this one, you can do a square as long as it's got this middle line. You can do a triangle for this one as long as it has this middle line and it mirrors itself on either side. All right, now I am going to do, let's see here. I'm going to do, here's my middle line. And I'm going to do this kind this time. Okay, so that's what I'm going to work on. And again, this is the fly stitch, and we are going to be using it as a fill. I'm going to go back in with my turquoise thread that I was just using. Now, for the fly stitch, remember that it is an open-ended lazy daisy, and we want your petals to be stacked on top of each other, and they're going to be following this center line. And so I'm going to start on this top edge here. I should do this on paper. Okay. So let's say here's my first one. I'm going to start on the top here, and then I'll go like this. Now I've come to the edges of that, but I'll just work my way down this side now. So then it'll go like this. Okay. If I'm doing this one, same thing. I'm going to do this. And I'm just going to keep working from edge to edge. And your anchor stitch is always going to be on that center line that you drew. Anchor, 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 anchor. Same thing here. You're going to go like this, anchor. And the cool thing about this stitch is that your stitch angle will change. You may even end up with straight lines. On this one, you'll probably end up with straight lines. But you still get this very cool texture from your anchor stitch that goes down the middle. Fly stitch I tried on this one. I didn't in the middle here and at the top. I stacked them very, very close. And then as I got in here for a few stitches and down here, I gave them some space in between just to see what would happen. Right? So let's jump into doing this on the fabric. Okay, now the only thing that's different about this, if you're using the fly stitch as a fill, I'm actually going to turn this around so that we won't be working on top of this drawing that I did. We'll work from this end. First thing you want to do is you want to come up on that center line that you drew and you're going to do one straight stitch. And I would say maybe 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to do it this big. You can see it does not have to be exact. There's not a rule for this. So I have a straight stitch. Okay. Now I'm going to start my fly stitching or my open-ended lazy daisy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here. You know what? Just as a quick reminder, sorry, y'all, I should have thought of this before. As a quick reminder, I'm just going to do a basic one over here. So I'm going to come up. Instead of going down in the same hole or right next to it, I'm going to give myself a gap. And then I'm going to come up here, wrap this around. And again, this is at the sort of midpoint between where I came up and went back down. Okay. So there I have a rounded petal. I can leave it at that and do my tacking stitch, or I can pull this really tight and get more of like, if I stack these, I'm going to get a chevron. So that's the cool thing about this fly stitch is that you can really, with your tension, change the shape of the stitch. Okay, tack it at either one. All right. Now we're going to go back to our shape. So got my straight stitch that I started with. And I'm going to come up right next to it here because I want this to be a nice fill stitch. Kind of just to the left of my straight stitch, going down just on the right of my straight stitch. Okay, and I'm going to come up. I'm always going to be coming back up for my anchor stitch on the center line of my shape that I drew. Now I'm going to put my loop over here. I'm not using the pro move this time. Now I pulled up. You can see that I pulled up the end of my knot here. Hold that down. Here we go. Loosen this up so you can see what's going on again. Okay, came up through my loop. There it is. Okay, and so now I'm really hugging that first straight stitch that I made. And now I'm going back down just on the outside, tacking it down. And we're going to do that again. Now I'm working, following this contour of my shape, coming up just to the left of that first lazy daisy or fly stitch shape, going down just on the right. Now I can pro move if I want. It's a little harder to pro move on the fly, but you can do it. Back behind. And I'm just really pulling my thread sort of really taut perpendicular to the fabric here, parallel to the fabric. And that really causes that fly stitch to like actually physically wrap itself around the one before it. So if you're really pulling this way instead of up in the air, you're going to get those really close together. And now I'm going to tack that down, putting my needle down on the center line. I'm going to do a few more so you can see what happens when I work to the edge of the shape as opposed to this end piece. Up on the left, down on the right. See if I can get my pro move on this one. There it is. Okay. Hugging that thread. And now over here, I wasn't quite, my shape's not perfect, so I'm gonna come up. I guess I can get one more on the end here, down. Okay, no pro move this time, coming up on the center line, through the loop. Okay, tack it down. All right, now I'm to the sides. So I've completed this edge. So now I'm going to now move up. So you can see that I'm now moving up the edge here. I'm coming up on the left. And again, I'm just going to find that drawn line here on the right. And don't worry about it because this curves, and especially if you're doing one of these type shapes here, these are not going to be working across from each other, even though we're working in what is technically symmetrical because of the mirroring, because of the different contours. Don't worry, you're not working, it's not like ladder rungs. They're not necessarily going to be across from each other. I'm going back down on the side there. My tail is getting a little bit too long. I'm going to pull that shorter. Oops. I'm going to hold on to my loop here while I get my tail shortened up. There we go. All right, coming up in the center. There we go. Okay, now let's say I want to create some of those fun spaces like I had. So now I'm just going to say, okay, I'm going to come up that far, whatever that is, up my line. And I'm going to try to just sort of be like, okay, that's about that far. That's about that far. I'm going to come over here and go back down. And then I'm going to eyeball that same distance on my center line. Oops. There it is. I'm not too worried about it being perfect. And I want to look at my tension here. Like I want this to sort of mirror this shape over here. So I'm going to loosen this up a little bit. There we go. Go back down on my center line. I'll do another one that way. Pro move. Coming up on the center. Wrap that behind. Now, here's another cool thing you can do with the fly stitch. Let's say I want to be done here. Or not, but I just want to have sort of this connecting line, like the tail of an arrow. Now I've got this little line here. And I can use that as my guide on my next one. As in, I want my anchor stitch to be right at the end of that center line. This is a fun one to play with. Pull that tight, and I'll do another long one. A long anchor stitch instead of a little tack. Look, I turned that upside down. It was like such a cute little flower. Okay, so that is the fly stitch used as a fill. I'm going to show you this again. So here it is here. I ran out of this thread, like totally ran out of it. So I switched over to this lighter color to finish it off. On this one, I really got, these were practically straight down here. And I could have just switched over to the satin stitch because the satin stitch is just filling with straight lines. But that's that anchor stitch that gives you this beautiful texture, like the rib of a feather or rippling water. I just love it. And then here's another close-up. Down here, I did those longer tails, gave it some space. Here it's closer. Okay. So those are both the fly stitch fill. Now, the last thing that I did over here was this. And this is just lazy daisies, but instead of a regular old anchor stitch, I used a French knot to anchor them. So you get this really lovely, again, texture that's almost like beads. Okay, and then for that, I'll just do that very, very quickly. I'll just show you. And this one you definitely want to do on a small shape. This one does not look very nice if it's not a small shape. So I'll do the same diamond shape-ish over here. And I'm going to start with this longest one because that helps me establish my angle, just like when we did our satin stitch, if you recall. What I'm going to do is come up here. This is back to the old regular lazy daisy, although you could absolutely combine this crisscross lazy daisy with a French knot up here. This is really fun to play with. But for this one, standard teardrop lazy daisy, I'm going to go back in the same hole. Pro move, I'm going to come up here, wrap this around. There's my loop, my little petal shape. Now, I'm going to do my French knot. I'm just going to do a French knot real quick here. Wrap, wrap, wrap. Make sure I'm coming down on the other side because this is still an anchor stitch. Push that in. I'm a little stuck. Ugh. There it is. And there's my French knot right there. So this is a little small. Let's say it's that big. Okay, so I did French knot loop here, and then I did another loop here with a French knot, another one here with a French knot. So you can see I just worked from up the middle, down one side, and then came back and worked down that way. Okay, so if you don't know how to do the French knot, that is in our third video, the class 3 video from last time. Okay, so we've got the layered daisy, we've got the crisscross daisy, which I named. If you have a better name, let me know. Our fly stitch fill, and then the row of lazy daisies with French knots instead of typical regular anchor stitches. And that is that. So we'll come back next time and we'll learn a few more stitches, not lazy daisy stitches. We'll do a different stitch and we'll put in some more fun, colorful shapes here. So I'll see you next time. Bye.